Blue and red lights rippled across the cabin's wooden walls, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed in the early morning dark. I stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching two uniformed officers approach. Behind them, a woman in her 50s trailed close, arms folded with the kind of smugness only years of petty authority can build. She wore a beige pantsuit that practically shouted middle management, and her highlighted bob bounced sharply with every emphatic jab of her finger toward my cabin. "That's him, officers, the trespasser," she announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "He broke in last night. This property's been vacant for months, and suddenly this stranger shows up claiming he owns it. I'm the HOA president of Pine Ridge Estates, and I know every single homeowner here." The lead officer, a tall man with graying temples, approached with careful professionalism. "Sir, we received a call about a burglary in progress. Can you provide some identification?" I pulled my wallet from my pocket, sliding out my driver's license along with another card tucked behind it. As I handed them over, I noticed the other officer scanning the porch with a flashlight, searching for signs of a break in that didn't exist. The lead officer examined my license under the beam, then froze when his eyes landed on the second card. He looked at me, then at the card, and finally over his shoulder at the impatient woman, who was now tapping her foot. "Ma'am," he said slowly, turning to face her, "do you know who this is?" Her confident smirk faltered for the briefest moment. "I don't care who he claims to be. He's trespassing on HOA property without authorization." The officer's tone changed instantly. "Ma'am, this is Daniel Morrison, Senior Compliance Officer for the State Real Estate Commission." The color drained from her face like water slipping down a drain. It had all started just 3 days earlier when I got the call from my mother. Uncle Robert had passed away. Alongside the grief came unexpected news. He'd left me his lake cabin in Pine Ridge Estates. I'd only been there once as a teenager, nearly 20 years ago. The estate's lawyer mailed me the deed and keys, assuring me that the property taxes were current and the transfer complete. Worn down by an endless stream of property disputes at work, I decided to escape the city for a night, clear my head, and remember my uncle. The 3-hour drive through winding mountain roads was a balm in itself. I arrived just as the sun dipped behind the pines. The cabin was exactly as I remembered. Small but warm, with knotty pine walls and a stone fireplace still scented faintly with old smoke. I unpacked a few supplies, lit a fire, poured a glass of wine, and lost myself in a book. By 10, I was asleep to the lull of crickets and the faint lap of lake water. At 7 a.m., the peace shattered. Not a knock, a pounding. I stumbled to the door in yesterday's clothes to find a woman on my porch, clipboard in hand, and an expression like my very existence offended her. "Excuse me, but who are you and what are you doing in this property?" she demanded before I could even manage. "Good morning." I rubbed my eyes. "I'm Daniel Morrison. This is my cabin. I inherited it from my uncle." "And you are?" Her chin lifted like a flag going to half-mast. "Linda Garrison, President of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. No one has authorized any new residents here. This cabin's been vacant since Robert Morrison passed, and occupation requires HOA approval, transfer fees, and a full background check." "I literally own this property," I said flatly. "I have the deed and the keys. My uncle left it to me." She waved her clipboard like it was a badge of office. "That's not how it works here. Pine Ridge Estates has rules. You can't just show up and claim residence without the proper process. Where's your HOA application? Have you paid the $500 transfer fee? Have you received the new resident orientation packet?" I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly very aware I hadn't had coffee yet. "Listen, Linda, I appreciate your diligence, but I'm not a new resident. I'm the owner, spending one night at my own cabin. I don't need your permission to sleep in my own bed." Her face flushed crimson. "How dare you take that tone with me? I've been president of this HOA for 12 years, and I will not be disrespected by some city person. Who thinks he can waltz in here and ignore our rules?" she finished, her voice dripping with indignation. "I'm not ignoring anything," I replied evenly. "I'm exercising my property rights. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need coffee." I started to close the door, but she wedged her foot in the gap. "This isn't over. You'll be hearing from our HOA attorney. And if I see you here tonight, I'll call the police for trespassing." With that sunny farewell, she stomped off the porch, heels crunching down the gravel drive. I watched her retreat, already making a mental note to dig into Pine Ridge Estate's HOA bylaws. I'd met plenty of overzealous board members in my career, but Linda Garrison looked to be operating in a league of her own. The rest of the day passed in peace. I sorted through some of Uncle Robert's belongings, took the kayak out onto the lake, and even met a few neighbors, kind people who offered condolences and warm welcomes. Not one mentioned HOA approval. A couple, however, chuckled knowingly when I described my morning encounter. "Oh, you met Linda," said Tom from 2 cabins down. "Yeah, she's thorough. Tried to fine me once for using the wrong shade of brown on my deck stain. Had to drag out the approved color list and the actual paint can before she'd back off." That evening, I grilled burgers on the deck and watched the sunset set the lake ablaze in orange and violet. It was shaping up to be a quiet night, until I saw headlights coming up the drive. To set. The police cruisers stopped in front of my cabin. I stepped outside to meet them, still holding the coffee mug I'd been using since dinner. And that brought me to the present. Linda Garrison standing triumphantly behind the officers, her expression slowly dissolving as they recognized my name and credentials. The lead officer handed back my ID before turning to her. "Ma'am, can you explain exactly what crime you're reporting here?" he asked, his tone carefully measured. Linda sputtered, then found her footing. "He's trespassing. This property requires HOA authorization for occupancy, and he doesn't have it." The officer blinked slowly. "But he owns the property. You can't trespass on your own property." "The HOA has rules," she insisted, her voice pitching upward. "He hasn't paid fees or submitted applications or—" "Those are civil matters, ma'am, not criminal ones," the second officer cut in. "You called 911 to report a burglary in progress. That's a serious allegation." I decided to step in. "Officers, I'm happy to show you the deed and estate documents if it helps. Everything's properly filed with the county, and all taxes are current." "That won't be necessary, Mr. Morrison," the lead officer said. "We know who you are. My captain actually attended your property law compliance seminar last spring." He turned back to Linda. "Ma'am, are you aware that filing a false police report is a crime?" Her jaw worked soundlessly before words returned. "I didn't file a false report. He's not supposed to be here without HOA approval." "But he's not burglarizing anything," the officer replied with the patience of someone explaining arithmetic to a stubborn child. "He owns this property. HOA disputes aren't police matters unless there's actual criminal activity." I could see it dawning on her. Linda Garrison had just falsely reported a state official to the police. A state official who investigates property law violations and HOA overreach for a living. "Officers," I said calmly, "I appreciate your professionalism. I'd like to file a formal complaint. I was woken in my own home by police responding to a false burglary report. This is the second time today Ms. Garrison has harassed me over my lawful presence here." The lead officer nodded, pulling out his notebook. "Mr. Morrison, would you like to press charges for filing a false report?" Her face went from flushed crimson to pale ivory in seconds. "You can't be serious. I'm the HOA president. I was protecting our community from its lawful property owners." Asked, eyebrow raised. The next hour was a blur of statements. Linda called her husband, her HOA attorney, and at least 3 board members, each conversation sounding more desperate than the last as the reality of her situation settled in. As the officers prepared to leave, the lead one handed me his card. "If you need anything for your complaint, Mr. Morrison, give us a call. We take false reports very seriously, especially when they're used to harass property owners." The lead officer fixed Linda with a hard look. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you familiarize yourself with actual property law before making any more emergency calls." When the cruisers finally rolled away, Linda lingered in my driveway, looking far smaller than she had that morning. You won't really file a complaint, will you?" she asked, her voice stripped of the authority she'd worn like armor. "I was just doing my job." "Your job," I said evenly, "is to manage legitimate HOA business, not harass homeowners or misuse emergency services. I'll be reviewing Pine Ridge Estates bylaws thoroughly. I suggest you do the same." The complaint was filed the next morning before I drove back to the city. But that was just the beginning. Back at my office, I pulled Pine Ridge Estates' file. What I found was illuminating. Years of overreach, questionable fine structures, and improperly noticed meetings. Linda Garrison's reign had left a paper trail a mile long. I scheduled a formal audit for the following month. State law is clear. HOAs must follow strict procedures, maintain transparency, and respect property rights. From what I was seeing, Pine Ridge was failing on all counts. The audit confirmed my suspicions: improper board elections, missing financial disclosures, and a clear pattern of harassment toward any homeowner who dared question Linda's authority. The State Real Estate Commission issued a formal notice of violation, ordering immediate reforms. But the real reckoning came 3 weeks later. At an emergency HOA meeting, packed with residents, the story of Linda's false police report and the state investigation had already made the rounds. Long-suffering homeowners finally had their chance to speak without fear. The vote to remove her from the board was unanimous. The only dissenting ballot was her own. I attended in dual roles, homeowner and state official, watching her at the podium, gavel in hand. As the secretary read the vote tally was almost pitiful. Almost. Her 12-year grip on Pine Ridge ended not with righteous fury, but with a desperate whimper. "This is illegal," she barked as the interim president asked her to step down. "You can't do this. I've given my life to this community." "The vote's been counted, Linda," Tom, my neighbor with the infamous deck stain, said calmly. "It's time to step aside." Security escorted her out as she clutched her clipboard like a life preserver, shouting protests into the night. I last saw her standing in the parking lot, looking hollow without her presidential authority. The fallout was swift. She was fined $5,000 for the false report and sentenced to 200 hours of community service. The HOA's insurance company, unwilling to shoulder the liability for her actions, refused to cover her legal bills. Rumor had it she'd taken out a second mortgage to pay her attorney. But the real justice came 6 months later. I was tasked with drafting new state guidelines for HOA governance, rules designed to prevent exactly the kind of abuse Linda had perfected. The Morrison Protocols, as they came to be known, set strict limits on board authority and reinforced property owner protections statewide. Linda Garrison's harassment had, ironically, paved the way for stronger homeowner rights across the state. These days when I visit the cabin, I sometimes see her, 3 streets over, walking her Pomeranian past my property. She never makes eye contact, never stops to chat, and certainly never utters a word about HOA business. Tom, now the board president, runs Pine Ridge with a lighter hand, focusing on actual community improvements instead of petty power plays. Last week, I received notice of the annual compliance review. As the state official assigned to oversee Pine Ridge's adherence to the Morrison Protocols, I'll be ensuring they follow every rule to the letter. The irony isn't lost on me, or on Linda, who, I'm told, turns pale whenever my name comes up in a meeting. The $5,000 fine she paid probably stung. But watching her realize that I'll be overseeing her former kingdom for the foreseeable future, that's priceless.